Committee will come to order. Welcome. Welcome. Welcome to everybody. The subcommittee's been very busy these last 2 months, finishing up fiscal year 2018 just a mere few weeks ago, and then diving right into 2019. We considered 215 requests from members of Congress and just finished up yesterday with our 9th hearing of the season. The recommendation for the fiscal year 2019 legislative branch appropriations bill provides $3.8 billion, excluding Senate items, which are historically left to the Senate to determine. The bill is $78 million below the agency requested levels. Priorities were placed on security, transparency, and reducing the deferred maintenance list for the Capitol campus to include security projects and other critical infrastructure needs. We also placed a major emphasis on listening to member priorities, and testimony from outside witnesses included as many of those requests as possible. We hope this openness in our own committee has set a tone for what can be done throughout the rest of Congress, and I will summarize the recommendations before us today. Under the House of Representatives, the bill includes $1.232 billion for the operations of the House. This is $32 million above last year and $28 million below the request. I'm confident the House's ability to achieve their mission at that level. Level funding for members' representational allowances will allow for increased levels as authorized by the Committee on the House Administration. This is extremely hard work, time-consuming, but also rewarding, and I'm sure my fellow subcommittee members agree. While we do this work, we are not simply rewarding ourselves, as some may think. The bill preserves for the 10th consecutive year the prohibition on pay increases for members of Congress, and the House will operate at 10% below fiscal year 2010 levels. For the Capitol Police, we allocate $456.358 million. This is $30 million above the FY19 levels. This funding level will provide the necessary resources for the Capitol Police to fund officers hired last year and hire additional officers to staff garage security and limited pre-screening. These men and women defend all of us and our constituents every day, and we're so grateful for their service. Under the Office of Compliance, we provide $5.4 million. These funds will help address the issues in requests for in-person training, enhancements to the online training models, and help address the overall increase in caseload. For the Congressional Budget Office, the bill includes the request of $50.7 million for the Congressional Budget Office for 2019. These funds, of course, will allow the CBO to increase responsiveness and analytical capacity. For the Architect of the Capitol, the subcommittee recognizes the continuing challenge of preserving and maintaining the infrastructure on Capitol campus. Included is $642 million for the Architect of the Capitol, excluding the Senate items, but this will be $31.5 million above the 2018 enacted levels. We focus significant funding on infrastructure with the understanding that a measure of preventative maintenance will save money in the long haul. Additionally, $10 million is included for the Revitalization Trust Fund to finance major repairs and renovations to House office buildings in future years. The bill also includes $709.878 million for the Library of Congress. This is $40 million above last year. Full funding is provided towards the modernization of the Copyright Office, including $21.3 million in additional funding, as well as new FTEs, 26 in the Copyright Office, and then 20 FTEs for the Congressional Research Service to address responsiveness to Congress and to expand analytical capacity. $20 million is provided towards the Visitors Experience Project at the Thomas Jefferson Building. I think the committee was impressed with Dr. Carla Hayden's presentation yesterday regarding the operations of the library, and we know this project in particular will be an educational and uplifting experience for all Americans, especially children from all walks of life. The Government Publishing Office, the bill includes $117 million for the GPO. We again commend the GPO for their ability to do more with less, and their funding has slightly decreased, which is a testament to their adoption of technology and extremely hard work. And then lastly, the Government Accountability Office. The bill includes $579 million for the GAO. Their funding is steady from last year, consistent with their request, and will allow them to continue to assist Congress in making smart policy decisions. I'd like to thank Ranking Member Ryan for his role throughout the process, as well as appreciation to all members of the subcommittee for their participation in the process this year. It has been an extreme pleasure working with Mr. Ryan, and I'd venture that if all committees could work with our level of collegiality, that Congress would be a better functioning institution. Finally, thank you to our full committee chairman and our ranking member for both being here today. And with that, I will yield to my good friend from Ohio, Mr. Tim Ryan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the opportunity. And let me first just thank you and your team for all of their hard work with this bill, especially your initiative to bring in the outside witnesses. I thought we got some great ideas last year and this year, and I think it's a sign of leadership opening this committee up to some of these outside ideas, only to help us do our job better. So thank you for that. You are correct. We had 9 budget hearings in the space of 3 weeks. So a lot of work went into the last few weeks. It was a little bit hectic, but at the end of those hearings, we ended up with a bill that gives most of the legislative branch agencies most of what they ask for. $4.88 billion, and this bill represents a $180 million, 3.6% increase over last year, allowing us to fully fund legislative branch agencies, including the Capitol Police, the Office of Compliance, the Congressional Budget Office, the Architect of the Capitol, the Government Publishing Office, the Copyright Office, and Books for the Blind, all at or above the levels of their revised budget requests. And we know these are all very important programs. The Capitol Police, the Sergeant at Arms, everything that's happened in the last year or so, this is all necessary. We are also making another substantial investment in the Library of Congress's visitor experience, which ultimately will allow the library to be a more valuable resource for all of our constituents. And it was exciting to hear the testimony this week from Dr. Hayden about that project, and that's going to be spectacular. Thank you to the staff on both sides in the committee and personal offices for helping us get this far this quickly. I look forward to discussing and debating the details of this bill further at the full committee markup. Once again, Mr. Chairman, thank you so much for your leadership, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you, Mr. Ryan, for those wonderful comments. I'd now like to yield to the chairman of the full committee, Rodney Fraylinghausen, the gentleman from New Jersey.
Okay, thank you, Chairman Yoder, and Tim Ryan, your ranking member. Thanks for the great work together on this very important committee, and for having 9 hearings. I understand outside witnesses. Of course, the United States Capitol is a remarkable place, and the people come here of all ages deserve to have an experience of a lifetime, and indeed they do. And it's good to know that you provided in this bill for their safety and security. And you've also provided in this bill money to improve the lot and salaries for the Capitol Police, who at times have paid the supreme sacrifice, making sure that all of us are safe. We recognize that. I'm a great fan of the Library of Congress. I'm a great fan of literacy. And I'm so pleased that you continue the strong support for that institution, as well as other programs and institutions under your authority, and obviously commend you and your members for your full participation, and yield back.
Thank you for your comments, Chairman Fraylinghausen. We'd now like to yield to the gentlelady from New York, the ranking member, Ms. Lowy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ranking Member Ryan and Chairman Fraylinghausen for your work on this bill. I want to start by congratulating our Minority Counsel, Adam Berg, on the birth of his second daughter, Layla. Congratulations. The FY 2018 omnibus was an important first step in digging many agencies in our legislative branch out of the hole caused by sequestration. This bill continues on that path with a $180 million increase for a total of $4.88 billion in fiscal year 2019, though it falls $24.9 million below the revised budget request. These investments are critical to the efficacy of the legislative branch. However, I cannot say that everything in this bill is perfect. For example, the Library of Congress would receive $709.9 million, $3.8 million above the revised request. However, outside of a very generous $20 million for the librarian's very worthwhile visitor experience initiative, the library's salaries and expenses would be $6.2 million below the request, which would require the library to absorb employees' mandatory cost of living adjustments. Frankly, I don't get it. It seems to me, as people who all support the Library of Congress, it's just irresponsible to force the library to leave positions unfilled and reduce library operations, such as cleaning services, when we have the ability to fund them adequately. I also wish it invested more in Congress as an institution. When we don't keep pace with the private sector, the executive branch, and frankly the Senate, we lose or fail to attract talented professionals who are essential to the legislative process, and we strain the House's ability to serve the American people. Mr. Chairman, I'm also interested in the change regarding the office of the former Speaker from 5 years to 1 year. I have a request from Lita Pelosi, who, as we know, is a former speaker, that asks that we absolutely do away with all the funding of the office at all. As we move to full committee, I hope the majority will work with us on these concerns. Thank you.
Any other comments or amendments? Chair recognizes Gentlelady from Florida, Ms. Wasserman Schultz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chair, I raised this issue when we had the Architect of the Capitol hearing, and Mr. Ayers was here and mentioned how much the renovations in the future that we know we have to implement are going to cost. The House Historic Buildings Revitalization Trust Fund is funded in this bill at $10 million. In FY 2017, we were able to fund it at 17. We historically have put in for several years $30 to $70 million, and then eventually moved over $162 million to the Canon revitalization so that there could be more transparency, which I supported at the time. That's the purpose of banking it, and you want to make sure that when you move that money so they can use it, which saves the committee money from using budget authority, that we continue to appropriately use the trust funds so that future we're not hamstringing future chairs who would need to use budget authority, and in this very small bill really have a tough time funding incredibly special priorities like the library experience. So I really urge you going forward to consider and work with me and others who are concerned about this, to the big chairman as well. We are going to, if we bank only $10 million over 10 years in the trust fund, that's $100 million, and the future costs of renovating the Longworth and Rayburn building, as Mr. Ayers told us, are projected to cost well over $1 billion. I mean, this is a $4 billion bill. So it is penny wise and pound foolish to do that. And particularly, and you couldn't get a bigger supporter of the library than me, but to put in a lot more, many millions more dollars into the Library of Congress than they asked for the library experience, the visitor experience there. Shortchange the salaries, the mandatory salary increase that they have to pay for, and not put in adequate funds so that we can actually use the Revitalization Trust Fund in a fiscally responsible way doesn't make sense to me. So I'm just wondering why we're only at 10 million, and I know that that's what Mr. Ayers had in his budget, but he acknowledged here that that's not enough for us to actually address our needs over time. That's an actual question.
Oh. This was the request from the architect. I think you certainly make a good point. When we looked at what the Rayburn cost would be into the billions, it's probably not possible for us to save the billions we would need necessary. And when we debated either spending money on current projects that the architects put forward or not spending money on those projects today and saving money for future projects, actually, to me, it appears that it's costing us money to postpone projects today to save money for those projects later. So I think if you could do all of it, great. If their list is exhausted and they say we have no current projects that we want to spend next year, then to me, your suggestion would make a lot of sense. But if they have existing projects that we can move forward on today, I don't know about saving it for a project that, to me, those projects just get more expensive if we postpone them. So the idea of postponing those projects drives up the cost of them, and to me is not fiscally responsible. So that's why we chose not to go beyond the request of 10 million.
Mr. Chairman, essentially, it sounds like you're saying you don't think the Revitalization Trust Fund makes sense. We have a 10, really, I'm not sure how much of the Canon project funding we have left, but it is well over $100 million. And so we don't have that in our, in our savings now. And I can assure you, you're probably not going to be the chair of this subcommittee past this cycle. Just a prediction. I don't mean that you're not going to chair it. I just mean that you're not going to be leading in a leadership role. Let's put it that way, so I can be politically neutral. But I presided over this subcommittee, and which I know you know, but this is from experience. When we were trying to finish the Capitol Visitor Center, and it was many years over budget, millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars over budget, more than tens of millions over budget, years overdue. The reason that we came up with this trust fund is so that we could avoid the likelihood of that happening again, and that we could make sure that our colleagues who led this effort here were not in the similar situation that we inherited on that version of the subcommittee at the time. So respectfully, you will face this issue going forward. As we have before, I'd like to hopefully work with you so that we can not just leave $10 million. The way the Library of Congress, the way the AOC projects work in terms of infrastructure is they have a cutoff. There's above-the-line projects and below-the-line projects. They ideally try to get their above-the-line projects funded, which I assume you have funded in this bill. It's not realistic to say that until we fund every single project, we can't put any more than their request into this trust fund, because we never fund all of their projects, because they don't need all of their projects funded immediately. So respectfully, that's not an argument that really lines up with the way the structure of their budget is put together. So I hope we can work together, as we have in other fiscal years, to add more funds so that we aren't being fiscally
And I think, and I appreciate the gentlelady's comments, and I think, if we'd like, when we get to the full committee, if there are projects the architect is doing now that you've determined they shouldn't do under this bill, that they should be postponed, and you'd like to move that money into the trust fund, I think the committee would entertain that. I'm not saying I would support that, but I think that's a reasonable position to take. Is we've got an allotment, we've got a 302B number, the architect presents us with a list of projects, so we have choices. Do we want to fund all those projects? Do we want to save some of the money for future projects? That's a great debate for the committee to have, but that's where the trade-offs would have to come.
No, they wouldn't have to come from there. We deal with an entire bill and the whole allocation and the decision that you've made in your mark to where to allocate funds.
You could certainly take it from GAO or there's plenty of agencies you could, but I think the committee would think that cutting those budgets back to save money for future construction may not be consistent with the priorities of the members of the committee. But that's a debate we should have. And so you certainly are welcome to, probably, the bill very well, and you're certainly welcome to in the full committee, or you can do it now if you want, to figure out where you'd want to move the money from there, and the committee can debate, and the majority will determine, and we'll move forward.
That's the plan, Mr.
That's all right. We'll look forward to that. All right. Now I'd like to recognize Mr. Frelinghuysen, Chairman, for a motion.
Move that the bill be moved forward to full committee.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. I ask unanimous consent that the staff be authorized to make technical and conforming changes to the bill and report as necessary. The subcommittee is adjourned.